All right, we are going to continue with media availabilities today here at Kansas Speedway. We are now joined by Tyler Reddick, driver of the number 45 2311 Racing Toyota. We will get right to questions. We will start up here with Cameron.
Cameron Richardson, NASCAR.com. Tyler, 2311 as a whole didn't have the pace you guys were looking for here in the spring. Were you guys able to pinpoint what caused that in the spring, and are there any concerns that they could arise this weekend?
There was a lot of things that happened in the race that contributed to that. Specifically for our team, we were very close in practice. Qualifying didn't exactly pan out perfect. Made some mistakes on my end that put us out of the top 10. But as for the race itself, I'd say we were decent. I think we could have ran top 5. But certainly hitting the wall the way that I did to start the race, racing with the 48, did a lot of damage to our car. And from there, it spiraled out of control. We ran something over, put a hole in the floor in the car. So, just a lot of things went wrong to really hurt the performance. But certainly seeing some of the tire wear that we had that some of the others didn't, there's things to be learned there. But I think, the finish wasn't great, but we didn't, as we prepared for this coming weekend, we weren't panicked or in any kind of freak out coming back here because the other Toyotas ran good and we know where they're at, and we've been very close to, we've had winning speed and had that potential in years past. So we knew that we weren't going to have to look at a lot of things to improve or change coming back.
Caleb Vessel, SpeedwayDigest.com. Tyler, you won this race last year. It was earlier in the month of September last year. Now it's at the tail end of the month. Does that make a whole lot of difference into what you can bring from, or what you can take from last year's race into this year? And explain on that if you don't mind.
Well, when the race happens isn't necessarily a factor. It's just the temperature of the weekend. Is it cloudy? Is it sunny? What's the air temperature? What's the track temperature? Is it going to be humid? Is it going to be dry? All those things kind of change it more so than the time of year. And typically, further into the year, it's normally a little bit cooler. But that's all information we know coming into it and have already adjusted for. So I don't necessarily think it moves the needle on what you bring setup-wise, but it can kind of dictate, where you start with the balance of your race car when you compare to the spring or other races.
We'll go to Bob, Reed, and then Steven.
Bob Hockers, Fox Sports. You win the regular season championship, have some momentum. How would you characterize the first round, and do you have any momentum left?
It's there, yeah. Well, we'll see shortly. I think it's there, but it was definitely not a good first round for us. I think a number of things played into that, but we've done a really good job all year long of, at our worst, being able to still get a top 10 out of it. And some of the handling issues that we had at tracks where normally it's not an issue for us really set that in stone for that first round. I think we still could have scored decent points, especially the last two races. It just we were just missing things a little bit, made mistakes in qualifying on my behalf that put us back there, and then we're in that box where we have to get a little desperate or aggressive, if you will, to try and get some points out of it. So, we're able to look at the results and understand why we were there. We're not scratching our heads as to why we ran that bad. We know what caused it. It is what it is. It stinks, but we get to reset and start over this round where we were to begin it.
Reed.
Reed Spencer with NASCAR Wire. How much of a big thing was it for you to win at Talladega in the spring? Does that give you more confidence going into next week? And because it's a playoff race now, do you approach it differently?
I don't think we approach it differently. You still need to do what's best for your team, whether that's as yourself or working with your other Toyotas. I think a number of us, all of us will have, an understanding of what we need to do going in there. But each speedway is so unique. It's hard to. I mean, it can be good. I have confidence when we go to the speedways, certainly, that we know what we need to do to put ourselves in position to win. But every race plays out just so unique. It's hard to say, okay, well, it's going to play out the same way, and we're going to get to the front because of that. So we just have to be adaptable. When you go to a speedway race like that, you have to be ready to just adjust up or adjust down. Just depends on how much fuel saving takes place in the stages of the race. I think that's going to really dictate who gets where.
Steven, sunfurniture.com. Tyler, from the start of the season, the round of 16 was, kind of universally considered to be the wild card round with the tracks in it. But now after Kansas, we have Talladega, which can always be wild, and then we have the Charlotte Roval, the brand new configuration. Do you foresee that this round could be just as big of a wild card as the last 3 races?
Certainly, I definitely do. It'll be that much more important to have solid races, and that's kind of what our foundation has been. Majority of this year. So yeah, it'd be nice to leave here with a win and not have to worry about the next 2, but certainly our strengths has been about getting top 5s and getting top 10s, scoring a lot of points. If we do those things here, it'll put us in a position where we're not overly stressed going into Talladega. And then the Roval, we went into it last year below the cut and we're able to score a lot of points and advance by a good margin leaving there. So all 3 of these tracks I think are good for our team. So a lot can happen, a lot can take place early in the race, and at any point in the race that can really shift the flow of the race. But typically when that's happened this year, at some of these other events that we've normally had a good response to it and been able to come out in the positive throughout those more chaotic races.
Tim Moore, Motorsports Today. Tyler, I'm just wondering, from a technical standpoint, does it make it a lot easier knowing that that wild card race doesn't start the round and that you can kind of approach just a normal race to start this first or second round?
I think it can. It depends on where you're at. I think if you're below the cut line, if Talladega was the first race in the round, you're just trying to just have a really solid day, and then you can kind of manage and run your own race a little bit more at the next 2 if they're not speedway races. But at the end of the day, they all pay the same amount of points, the same amount of potentials out there to be had or lost every single race weekend. So yeah, I think when you look at it on a calendar, right, if next year it was the opening race of the round of 12, I'm sure people would be like, oh boy, that's going to be a stressful day. But anytime you go speedway racing, so much can happen in such a short amount of time that you're just kind of on the edge of your seat, if you will, throughout the whole race, just hoping that you can get out of there with a race car that's clean and leaves the way that it came to the racetrack.
And the follow-up with that, obviously you won here last year in the fall. Bubba won the 45 the year prior. What do you guys find balance-wise, or how do you find the balance going into practice to find the speed that you need ideally at this track?
I think a lot of it is what the team brings to the racetrack. Certainly, we play our part in what our car does, what kind of lap time it produces. But certainly, I definitely I've been fortunate, right? I feel like every time I've been here, whether it was the old car, this current car, whether it was RCR or now 2311, it just seems like I've been able to come here and have solid cars, and that gives me a good starting point to be able to have some good days. So certainly the car has to play its part, but at a place like this where you have the seams, the change in banking from the bottom to the middle to the top, the little bit of tire fall off that we have, it is in your hands. But I just think, it takes really fast Toyota Camrys, but also I feel like the team has had a really good mindset, and that's a fact. You can see it in the results. So certainly those things you have to keep in mind going into this race weekend.
All right, we're going to go to Dustin and then Daniel.
Dustin Long, NBC Sports. With the top 3 points, Larson, Bell, and you all have, I guess I'd say, similar backgrounds, and the success that you've had this season throughout the whole year. I'm curious, from a dirt track background what that means to see what you guys have been able to do and to win the races and have the success. And while drivers can come from any discipline to this series, what it might mean for, you know, the young kids or younger people out there to see what you guys are doing at this point.
Yeah, I think I've only been a part of small chapters of it, right? You know, I've only done this for a few years, but it certainly seems like from a fan's perspective, my perspective as a fan growing up, you know, there was less reward for taking the risk, and I feel like now that just continues to elevate. So for us, when we come from dirt racing, you know, we're used to making aggressive moves, dealing with aggressive racetracks, if you will, at times too, and just having to go out there and in the first lap or two find it. You know, you get 3 or 4 laps and warm up or practice, and you got to go run a lap in qualifying. So I think just our nature, our upbringing really kind of primed us for how this car races today. You know, you hear Kyle talk about it right at Bristol. I mean, you're just 100% of all you got for 500 laps at Bristol, and that's just kind of the mindset we had growing up as drivers, just to always push the issue. You know, I remember the last time I did go run some dirt, it was like, wow, you know, my mindset's really shifted. You're used to having 40, 50 laps opening stage or 20, 30 laps in practice to really feel what you have. And when you go dirt racing, you need to find it in 2 laps. And a lot of times your race is 20 to 30 laps, maybe 50 in some of the bigger ones. So you don't have the time, the luxury of time that you do here. So it does really seem like the dirt racing mindset has applied well to this next-gen car, I feel.
And you know, you talk about the first round not being as good as you'd hoped. And obviously in all of sports, there's always this talk of momentum, positive or negative. And, you know, a team can be good throughout the whole season and all of a sudden hit a slump at the wrong time, and all of a sudden they're in trouble in the playoffs. How do you look at momentum? Because this stretch here was, I think maybe there's one other stretch in the spring that wasn't as good for you. But other than that, you've been, like you said, consistent, had the top 5s or get top 10s and score stage points, and haven't had that. How do you look at that momentum? How do you worry? I mean, how do you address it? Or is it just each track is so different that you don't look at momentum? Because a lot of people look at it as some sort of X factor in a way.
Yeah, when things are going good, you know, it's easy. Confidence comes with very little effort, right? And I think when you have a tough stretch or a bad weekend, you know, you have to, however it may work for you or that team, you know, you've got to do the things that help get you back in the right mindset going into the next weekend. So, yeah, it was certainly, you know, a letdown for us to perform like we did in the first round. But, you know, it's hard to stay down for more than a couple hours after the race, because when we look ahead and see what we have in front of us, one, a great opportunity, but also very, very good racetracks for our team, good style of racetracks for our team. So it's you know, you're kind of in control of that, if you will. You know, the team, the driver, you just got to have the right mindset. And we've had these things happen in the past. You know, a year ago, it was up, and as soon as it got up, it was all the way back down to the very bottom. So we've had to deal with this in the past. So I think we can manage it.
Dale McFadden, FrenchFresh.com. Tyler, 2311, you guys have been great here the last few years and on intermediates in general, but it's been since May since the series raced on an actual 1.5-mile track. Now you got 3 of them coming up here in the playoffs. So how do you, given that how long it's been, how do you feel about what you guys can do with your 1.5-mile program in the playoffs?
Yeah, looking back at it, you know, we had Charlotte where we had, unfortunately, you know, start from pit road essentially, and then pulled off the leaders on scuffed tires. I mean, I know we were good there. I was planning on using all 400 laps to get to the front, and we ran out of time, unfortunately. And then, you know, I look at Michigan, and that car was just lights out. So Michigan and Kansas are different sizes, but the amount of banking the track has, some of the things that you need to have as a driver in your car or mindset as a driver can apply here too. So being that we were as good as we were at Michigan, we can't help but be really excited for this weekend at Kansas.
And we'll take our final question right up here.
Eric, you step out of the groove. You've been one of the best road course racers recently. What do you make of the changes to the Roval, and do you think that could make it an even bigger wild card in a few weeks?
You know, I'm not totally sure how it's going to change it, but you know, I remember when, you know, we went to running the Roval and just there's a lot of unknowns. I remember how slick the surface was. You know, the tire we were running at the time was a harder tire on the Cup and Xfinity car, and it just didn't mesh well until it really rubbered in. So I remember a lot of spins, a lot of crashing in practice, but for the most part, a lot of the surface hasn't changed. Right, it's just that stretch from turn 6 over into the new turn 7. So I'm not totally sure. I think, you know, it's a corner. There's not a lot of corners around the Roval where you really have the option to use the bumper or get physical to move people out of the way or get position. But that new turn 7 is certainly going to be slow enough where, you know, if you do a good enough job and stay close to someone through 6, I think it's slow enough to where you're going to be able to move someone out of the way without completely ending their day. So it is a bit of an unknown. Certainly there's some elevation changes that seem pretty alarming, but we'll tackle it. You know, I think the whole industry figured out the Roval pretty quick, and I think we'll be able to figure out this change.
All right, thanks for the time and good luck this weekend.
Thank you.
All right, there's the checkered flag. Great job, driver.